So good morning, everybody. This is going to be really quick. For those of you who know me, I talk really fast, even in English. So I might try it in German, then I talk very slow, probably. But so this is the English version. This is a new talk, and it's a bit about the thing that all bothers us. Will we still have a job as developers in 5 years' time? What do you think? Are we still going to have a job? We will, don't worry. That's going to be the message, right? So if I don't get to the end of the slide deck, that will be my message. So yeah, AI. So we are all using AI, right? Who is not using AI in their daily work these days? Only a few. Oh, you will be left behind, by the way. So don't worry. This is going to be really quick. So what's the newest keyword in this? Well, you know all these keywords. I had this generated by Sora yesterday in Ghibli style. Studio Ghibli is not really happy with it, but anyway. So, but this is the new one, right? Have you heard of this before? If not, you should check up on your LinkedIn because it's now sort of pushing Scrum out of the door and vibe coding becomes it. So the question is, what is vibe coding? Now, it's actually something that somebody coined somewhere on the internet, so they made it's actually already in the dictionaries. That's quite cool. So vibe coding is an AI-dependent programming technique where a person describes a problem in a few sentences, usually English, as a prompt to a large language model tuned to coding. Cool, right? Have you done this? It's actually quite cool. I'll show you. And the good thing is, it will allow even amateur programmers to produce software. Now, that's where the worrying starts, right? This is the part that I'm not so sure about. So I want you to meet Elmo. This is Elmo. This is in our office at iBoot. We had a few of these, so we built them into a house. He is our content director. And he came up to me a couple of weeks ago and he said, you know what? I've been trying out Cursor and I made an app on iOS. It's running. He does not know how to code, by the way. He is an amateur programmer. Well, he's not even a programmer, right? So this is worrying, right? This is like, wow. This is when managers start to say, well, you guys don't have a job anymore in 5 years' time because you just use these tools and we have people like Elmo writing the code. He's usually creating our content and stuff like that. But so here's the thing. This is what he used. This is called Cursor AI. And I'll show you a bit about Cursor AI. So this is what it looks like. It's built on VS Code. And on the right side, you have these dialogues. And you can talk to Cursor AI in natural language. So I did. So I was doing some React stuff, and I said, well, could you extract the form from the node bar and put it in a separate component? It said, yeah, sure, I'll do that for you, right? So it started working, and then it says, well, there were some linter issues, and I'll fix the linter issues for you, and oh, wait, found another linter issue, and it wrote some code on the right side. I can click accept, and it will put it into my code base. It's pretty neat, actually, right? And it does that now, and well, here's a bunch of stuff, and then I said, well, done. I created a node form component, updated the types, refactored the code using a way to sync, and fixed all the type errors. Done. It worked, actually. Quite cool, right? And then I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try to do some refactoring with it. What happens if you start doing refactoring? And well, actually I said, well, we have this with agent interface or type. I don't actually know if it's type or interface, it's TypeScript. And I'm like, yeah, please use that. And it's, oh, wait, I found it. And I can actually do this. I can now use it, and it will actually remove some of the code from it. And it looks better. It makes the code more consistent with the rest of the code base. That's pretty cool, actually. This is all within a couple of minutes, right? And it continues. And I'm saying, okay, please rename on success don't finish. Just trying out some stupid bullshit. My WebStorm ID does this as well, right? It's not very complicated. So it will actually do that, and it will say, well, okay, do that. Then I got to unit testing. I'm like, wait, here's the stuff we all like, right? Writing unit tests. You have to do it, by the way. There's no option. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try to write my unit test. And the nice thing is, if you write unit tests for React components, they're all a little bit fuzzy and a bit complicated. I'm like, no, let's see what it does. So then it said, okay, please write the missing unit test for this new structure and update the current ones accordingly. And then it started saying, wait, I cannot find where your test code is. Because apparently we use a different place where we put a different location. We do have the test code, but it couldn't find it at first, right? And then it started generating some test code, and I said, well, you know what? There actually is a test file, so please merge it and put it in there, right? And then it says, oh yeah, wait, I have found it. And then it created a new test in a different location. And I'm like, so where did you put it? It's a nice conversation, right? This is basically the conversation I have with my kids. Where did you put thing? Well, it's not in the dishwasher, it's somewhere else, and stuff like that. So yeah, and it started doing stuff, and yeah, well, I created it there, and then so well, please merge it into one, and then it starts getting a little bit fuzzy, right? This is where you're gonna talk about quality. So what's the problem with quality, right? This is my local Albert Heijn. For those of you not Dutch, this is our local supermarket, and here's the best. The best coffee is at eyesight, right? That's why you want it. It's the most expensive. It has the highest quality, the best brand, the best roast, and the cheap coffee is on the bottom shelf. So for quality, we're used to pay more money, right? That is the model that we know. So the more money you put into it, the higher the quality in most products. In software, it's a little bit more complicated. In software, we have to do different things, right? In software, we can actually say, well, listen, all these things matter when it comes to quality. That makes it very, very complex to talk about quality. The good thing is, let's talk about code, right? Most people who are complaining about AI, they're complaining about the quality of the code that comes out. And let me show you a little bit about it. So it is actually quite fuzzy. So the quality of software is highly intangible, right? If you build that iOS app that Elmo was building, and you can build it in a day, and you can put it in Xcode, and it compiles and just runs, that's it, right? If you're not interested in doing more with it, it's fine. I actually asked Elmo if he wrote tests for it, and he's like, what? He had never done that before. He didn't even know the concept, right? So, and that's the thing. This is where we start to get into trouble, because there's going to be a lot of people who are going to try this out and see what happens. Now, here we go, right? So, and then I said, well, if you write this unit test, please write me some unit tests for this code. And it started doing this. Now, this is actually, so the @idea is a function we wrote. We wrote sort of like a small library around Jest to make sure that we can use it easier and that our junior programmers can use it much more, easier basically. So we said, well, we have this @id thing, and you can just call it, and you can call type on it. And it doesn't know that, of course, right, at first. And then it says, yeah, you can do @id.element, which is probably true. It did compile though, but it's like, that is not the way we use it, right? And go figure it out, dear cursor, whether you can actually make it work in a way that we want it to. And then I figured out that one of the inputs in my form is actually a markdown component. So we have a markdown editor in there. And it doesn't work the same way as the rest of our inputs. So I said to it, so basically see that the form.markdown, the component we wrote, is actually an MDE container. And I'm not sure how to add a value to it, because it needed to add a value to make sure that if it presses submit, that the test would actually work. And then it started going into directions that I was like, nah, I'm not sure if I want it. And then it said, well, basically, I found that type thing that you were using. So you can now say @id type. He could have done this in one line, actually. But and then we click on the submit, it's good. And I'm like, yeah, sort of. But you know, the data, the form.markdown, it doesn't have a data test ID, so I can't find it in the document. And I was like, oh, okay. Now what do we do? And then it started going off the deep end, basically. It says, well, I can see that it's this thing. And when it's this thing, I'm going to do a whole bunch of this thing. So I'm going to muck the whole component out, which it really didn't want to. And then it sort of goes into circles. I'm like, nah, I don't want this. It's too complicated, right? So and then I ran the test, and it actually gave an error. And then it said, wow, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to what it was before. And then it started going into, I'm going to create the fire event back again, and I'm going to remove the code that you wrote that made it easier and better working with our frameworks. And it went off again. And everything returned to the place I was before. And this is a journey I have a lot of times when working with AI, is that you need to provide it with a solution, then it can come up with a solution, but eventually it goes into its limits. And then you're back at square one. And you're like, okay, now what? Now, this is a little bit where it gets confusing, right? And this is what you see people do. Like this, I found this on the internet. I said, my SaaS was just built with cursor, 0 handwritten code. That's what you see people say, right? Yeah, I didn't write any code at all. I just wrote English language. And then it says, well, now you can continue to whine about it or start building it. Yes, people pay for it. So sort of like an advertisement for cursor, I guess. And then 2 days later, he posted this. He says, guys, I'm under attack. Ever since I started to share how I built it, so people are, random stuff happens, and well, it's a little bit more complicated than we thought it was, right? And that's where the trouble hits the fan, right? This is a good moment halfway in my talk to introduce myself, I think. So this is me. I'm Sander. I'm an independent dad of 3 grown-up kids. I speak a bit, I write a bit. But what I mostly do is I write code. As I've been writing code since 1978. Which is probably longer than most of you people in the room, although I see quite a few other bold gentlemen, so you must be the same age I am. By the way, if you want to do a keynote here, you have to be sort of like bolding and named Sander. It's a mandatory thing. I'm currently the CTO for a company called ibo.com, which you might know. It's an e-commerce company that has daily new deals, etc. So, here's the thing. By the way, to show you that I am a programmer, this is me. I'm actually double object-oriented. Yeah, who has that, right? It gets worse. I can show you where I live, which is here. This is taken from my window, actually. So I literally live here. So this is good, right? So what now? So, okay, if cursor doesn't fully do it for me, it doesn't do it 100% for me, should I revert back to it using the good old ChatGPT, which we all do probably, or almost all do? But I have some trouble with it as well. I was writing some tests for a component that needed to work in different resolutions on my screen, on my web page. And I'm like, how would you do that? And it started coming up with all sorts of crap and started hallucinating, and I didn't know it was hallucinating. I'm like, oh, yeah, interesting stuff. And then it said, well, you might want to install the framework JustMock window, and it will help you. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So I'll yarn it, and I'll put it in, and I'm like, not found. I'm like, what do you mean not found? It didn't exist. There is no such thing as JustMock window. It just came up with it. I'm like, okay, now what? Now, this is where we get into trouble, right? This is where, you're on the slide here. And I didn't know that you would be here, right? So this is where we get into trouble. This is where we go into tech debt, right? And I'll show you what tech debt means. So this is Ward Cunningham. He invented the phrase, right? And he said, well, shipping first-time code is like going into debt. A little debt speeds development so long as it's paid back promptly with refactoring. Right? That means we all take shortcuts, right? We do. We just do. It's what we do basically every day. So I've been writing code for a long time. Took a lot of shortcuts. It always bit me in the back, but this is what you need to do, right? At some point, you need to refactor it. Doesn't matter which paradigm you're using, where you do OO, or where you do FP, or where you do procedural code, whatever you do, you need to do that. If you don't do that, you get here, right? He says the danger occurs when the debt is not repaid. Entire engineering organizations can be brought to a standstill under the debt load of an unfactored implementation, object-oriented or otherwise. Doesn't matter the paradigm, basically. And this I see happening a lot. Now, the question is, what will AI do here for us, right? Now, AI writes code for us, right? And Edgar Dijkstra, the famous Edgar Dijkstra, says, if debugging is the process of removing bugs, then programming must be the process of putting them in there. And that's the thing. So if you write code, you put bugs in the code. That's what we do. That's why we write tests, right? So what does that mean for AI? Does AI do that as well? Well, here's a good quote I found by Jason Gorman. And Jason says, a code generation tool, which is AI basically, right, that gets you 80-90% of the way there is like a boat that takes you 80-90% of the way. You still need to be a good swimmer. And that is the whole point, right? So the whole quote about even amateurs now can write code, you might wonder whether that end up with a good solution, right? So there's research already being done, and apparently people find that in the age of AI, what will happen is we will actually incur much more technical debt than we ever did before. So if you are already in technical debt and you haven't used AI before, and you're going to start using AI in, let's say, the agnostic way, you're going to end up with a lot more technical debt, right? And then you might say, I don't want technical debt. That's where we come in, right? We're going to be battling tech debt for a long while. So here's the thing. And I was wondering, so what can I tell you what we do actually with AI? So my team is not that big, right? My team is about 13 people. So that means we don't have the means to build the whole internet, right? We need to make deliberate choices. And we are experimenting with it. And here's the thing, right? AI is a tool. Vibe coding is a tool, basically, right? So the question is, what do we have in tools? Now, I'll show you a little bit of history, right? Who of you has ever written COBOL? Yeah, cool. That's the bold people again, right? So, nah, just kidding. So here's the thing. It started off with COBOL. COBOL stands for business-oriented language, right? Common business-oriented language. It's the language designed to talk in sort of like natural language, so we can design code. It didn't become quite well natural language, and we went beyond that, right? We went into a decent programming language. Well, COBOL is a decent programming. Then we went into 3GL, 4GL. We started modeling. We created executable UML. We created DSLs. Then people started coming up with case tools, with better programming language, higher level programming language. And when we started going into, well, the cloud came along, right? And every time something new came along in this industry over the past 60, 70, 80 years, what happened is that we as developers, it allowed us to solve better, bigger problems, right? We don't have to do the things in punch cards anymore or write low-level API calls into an operating system anymore, unless you want to, of course, Jurgen, but we usually don't do that, right? We go way up. We write web forms in 3 lines of code. We couldn't do that 30 years before. Well, 30 years before there were no web forms, but so it grew on us. And it grew on me that our marketing director, who was on the left side of the slide, he said a couple of weeks ago, he said, well, here's the thing, right? What I see happening now, what you guys are doing in tech is that you are now solving problems that we need to get an external party for a couple of weeks even later before, right? So we started doing stuff using AI that we could have never done before ourselves. And that is the big picture, right? That is where it's going to go. We're going to either, on one hand, create a lot of tech debt, but try to solve it as well, and we're going to do stuff that we haven't done before. And that's cool. I'll show you a little bit about what we do, right? So this is where we come in, basically. This is the whole thing, right? We are not typists. Right? We are hired to think, right? We don't solve problems on the keyboard. We solve problems in our heads. That is where we are. This is what we are as programmers, as developers, all right? We solve the real problems. We talk to people and we solve their problems. And we could solve problems that we couldn't solve before. I'll show you a little bit about it. So this is my team. This is all I have, right? Well, not to, these are really smart people, by the way, but so this is the people I have to do it with. And we could do a lot of things that we couldn't do before. I'll show you a bunch of them. Really quickly, of course. So creating content. So we are an e-commerce website, right? So we have this unique sort of voice on the website. It's slightly funny, not as funny as some other companies that have blue logos, but well, you could debate on that, but it's like, it's sort of like funny content and stuff like that. And we wrote it ourselves for a long time. And then we're like, yeah, but the content team is not able to keep up with the growth of the company. So we needed to do stuff. So what we started doing is we built it like this, right? We said, okay, you know what? We're going to allow you, we're going to build some prompts, we're going to train the prompts with the content that we created over the last couple of years to give it the tone of voice that I would want. And then we can just say, well, generate the content instead of creating it yourself. At first they were very like, no, we cannot do that. And then they tuned the prompts themselves. And then we figured out that we actually could create quite a lot of content doing this. And we built this about half a year ago, right? We could have never done this before. We could translate content using DeepL or some other tool, but we could never create it. Now we do, actually. It saves a lot of work. It saves actually people from burnout in the company. No kidding. And then we started doing this. Wouter on my team built this, and he's like, because we want to compete against other companies, we need to know what the lowest prices are that we can find on the internet. That wasn't easy, actually. So we built a small process to do that. And it fires off a whole bunch of threads, and each of them takes a bunch of URLs and tries to find, based on the EAN, content on the web pages that we visit. That we use AI for. So we use the AI to scrape those pages and to figure out what the prices are that we can find on it. We could have never built this ourselves. It would have taken way too much time. And now we just say plop, and it runs in like 100 threads at the same time, and we find the best prices, and we created some links to it. This is the stuff we can now do, right? Our purchasers are really, really happy with this. It saves them a lot of time trying to figure it out themselves and looking up all the URLs themselves. It's that kind of stuff where we do small things with an AI that we couldn't have done before. And something we do right now is invoice recognition. This page is ugly. I just made a screenshot yesterday. It should have had the PDF on it, but we're not there yet. This is still under investigation. We get a lot of invoices from suppliers, right? They're checked by hand. There's 3 people in the company constantly checking invoices and whether the products have already arrived. We now automated that, and we do invoice recognition based on PDFs, with really complex PDFs. And we use some AI and we do some text scraping to actually make it put together. It's not out of the box, but we did it ourselves. Before, we had to run into some OCR recognition tooling with templates and stuff, really complicated and really expensive stuff. And we have now built this with 2 people in about 2 months. And it's really stuff that makes a difference. So that's where we want to go, and that's what we do, right? So we try to solve one small problem every day with my team. And we do use vibe coding. Yes, of course we do. So vibe coding is more like, I know where I want to go, and please help me get there, right? Whereas really cool techniques like pair program is much more like, we don't exactly know where we're going, but let's look at it together. Or do it in a group, right? We do this a lot, right? With a group of people looking at how can we find this particular solution for this particular problem we have. So if you don't know where you're going, then usually working with other people works really well. Unless you don't like working with other people, then vibe coding takes. But vibe coding is more like, I know where I want to go, please help me get the nitty-gritty details, and please write a unit test for it, right? So that's basically the difference. And that difference makes a lot of sense, right? So, in retro, because this is a fast, really short talk, we still haven't found the silver bullet. There is no silver bullet in this industry. There is no solution out there that takes it all. That's good news for us, right? For us as developers, that basically means that we are still there in 5 years' time because of this. Faster cars does not equal faster traffic, right? And that's because we solve problems, and we solve bigger problems than we could ever solve before. Every new tool that we get available, how fancy it may look, is still a tool, right? It helps us to solve the problems because we still do that. Unless there will be some AI in the future that knows how to solve our problems, we are still needed. And that's the good news. We just have even more tools in our tool chest, and that's the thing. So, as a result, we as developers, we can never, ever, ever stop learning, right? And by the way, we solve stuff, not the tools, right? And by the way, and if everything still fails, even if you use all of the AI, there's only one solution. You remove the node modules, and you do an npm install. Thank you for being here. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference.